For one full year, the PGA Tour told America that Saudi money was poison. Commissioner Jay Monahan stood on national television and asked the players who left for LIV Golf if they had ever had to apologize for being a member of the PGA Tour. He invoked the families of the September 11th attacks. He said this was about the soul of the game. Then on June 6, 2023, he sat down next to the governor of Saudi Arabia's public investment fund on CNBC and announced he was taking the money. The players found out from the news. So did Congress. So did the families. This is the story of how the PGA Tour called LIV a threat, then took their money in secret. The golden age and the moral high ground. To understand the betrayal, you have to understand the performance that came before it. From the launch of LIV Golf in June 2022 through the spring of 2023, the PGA Tour ran one of the most aggressive moral campaigns in modern American sports. Monahan went on CBS with Jim Nantz and effectively dared his own defecting players to look the families of the September 11 victims in the eye. He aligned the tour formally with the survivor advocacy group 9/11 Families United. He cultivated relationships on Capitol Hill with senators in both parties. He told sponsors that loyalty mattered, and the players who stayed, stayed. Some turned down offers reported to be worth tens of millions of dollars. Rory McIlroy reportedly turned down more than $400 million. McIlroy became the public face of the resistance. He defended the tour from podiums and press tents for 2 full years. He led players-only meetings. He helped redesign the schedule around fending off the Saudi threat. The PGA Tour was not just running a golf league. It was selling itself as the last clean institution in professional sports. The lawsuits against LIV were not framed as a business dispute. They were framed as a defense of integrity. That framing was the product. The audience bought it, members of Congress bought it, the families bought it, the players bought it most of all. The mechanism and why the wall came down. Now the forensic part. Moral campaigns are expensive. The lawsuits with LIV were spiraling, and antitrust discovery was about to do something the tour could not afford. It was about to pry open the tour's own internal records. Every email, every policy board minute, every revenue document, every private decision the commissioner's office had made about the war it was selling to the public. On the other side of the table sat a sovereign wealth fund with reserves north of $700 billion. The math was brutal. Keep fighting and bleed out in court while your own files become exhibits, or sit down with the people you have publicly condemned and make the lawsuits disappear. Monahan chose option 2, but here's the part that turns a difficult business decision into a scandal. He did not bring it to the players. He did not bring it to Congress. He did not bring it to the families he had spent 12 months invoking. He brought it to 2 policy board members, Jimmy Dunn and Ed Hurley, and they began meeting Yasser Al-Rumayyan, the governor of the Public Investment Fund, in secret, for weeks. While the public posture stayed identical, McIlroy was still in front of cameras defending the institution. Sponsors were still being told the Saudis were beyond the pale. Senators were still being briefed in committee offices. The moral campaign did not end. It was simply allowed to keep running as cover for the deal being cut behind it. The framework agreement was announced the morning of June 6, 2023. Monahan and Al-Rumayyan appeared together on CNBC. The lawsuits were dropped. The Public Investment Fund would invest up to $1.5 billion into the new for-profit entity. The PGA Tour, the DP World Tour, and the Saudis were now partners. Monahan would run the new company. Al-Rumayyan would chair its board. The PGA Tour's own players learned this from a Chiron. McIlroy got a text from Dunn the night before and a phone call the morning of. That was it. Justin Thomas and Colin Morikawa were caught reacting on Netflix cameras with the same shock as the public. LIV's own commissioner, Greg Norman, was kept entirely out of the negotiations. According to internal documents later released by the United States Senate, the agreement included a provision that he would be terminated upon execution of the final deal. The Senate Permanent Subcommittee on Investigations called a hearing for July 11, 2023. Senator Richard Blumenthal opened with the word hypocrisy. He read Monahan's own previous quotes back into the record alongside the framework terms. Terry Strada, chair of the September 11th Families Coalition, called Monahan and the PGA Tour in her words, paid Saudi shills. She said the families had been used as window dressing. The phrase landed hard because the documentary record made it impossible to deny. Monahan went on medical leave shortly after the announcement. Tiger Woods was added to the policy board on August 1st to restore some adult supervision. McIlroy resigned from the board in November, citing exhaustion and a job he no longer recognized. The framework agreement set a December 31st, 2023 deadline for a definitive deal. That deadline came, that deadline went, there was no definitive agreement, there still isn't one. The framework was not a merger. It was a surrender, signed in private, and presented to everyone who had been told the opposite for a full year. The legacy and the unbroken line. The damage was structural. The commissioner's office had spent its credibility, and credibility once spent does not come back on a balance sheet. On January 31st, 2024, 8 months after the framework agreement, the PGA Tour announced that Strategic Sports Group, led by Fenway Sports Group's John Henry, would invest up to $3 billion into PGA Tour enterprises. That deal exists because the framework deal existed first. The American capital only showed up after the Saudi capital made the asset look acquirable. Fenway, Steve Cohen, Arthur Blank, and a consortium of team owners walked through a door the Saudis had pried open. Talks with the Public Investment Fund continue to this day. The Commissioner's Office, which once spoke the language of integrity, now speaks the language of valuation, equity grants, and minority investors. The vocabulary changed because the product changed. Meanwhile, LIV kept signing players. John Rahm crossed for a deal reported near $500 million. Tyrrell Hatton followed. The threat the tour told America it was fighting kept getting larger, while the tour was negotiating with its banker. The players who stayed for principal are now equity holders in an institution that traded its principals for a check. That is the legacy. The PGA Tour didn't just lose its war with LIV, it quietly surrendered. It signed the terms in private. And it asked its own members, its sponsors' customers, and the families it had invoked for 2 years to keep cheering as if nothing had happened. Subscribe for more of golf's hidden history.